Continuing the Treasure of the Magi, a study of modern Zoroastrianism by James Hope Moulton. Book 2 has its second chapter entitled The Priesthood. Without a Magian, it is not lawful for a Persian to offer sacrifice. Herodotus. So obviously the Kahin, access-controlling priest, as the Semites would have called them, have become a dominant feature in the remnants of that religion. The Magian priesthood, which as early as Herodotus had become indispensable for the external side of Persian religion, is still firmly entrenched in the same position. The priests of the fire temple are called Mobeds, and the name implies descent from the ancient tribe which has so profoundly influenced the history of Zoroastrianism from the time of its first emergence into history after the blank period that followed the prophet's own age. So the 1700 to 2000 BCE period is definitely, the Magians were writing this down, so when was the actual prophet? Mogupeti in Avestan means Lord of the Magi. Like the priesthood of ancient Israel, or that of modern Hinduism, the office is strictly hereditary. The son of a priest is not obliged to take up the profession. In these days, it has small attraction for young men of ability and ambition, and a large proportion of priests' sons abandon it for secular callings that are more lucrative and more respected. Well, if you're traveling around and people are paying you for rituals and even paying you to do drugs and do rituals, I mean, what do you expect? Some reasons for the scantly honor that the priest receives will come out as we proceed. Occasionally we see a layman wearing the white turban distinctive of the priest, but without the white dress that they always wear. This indicates at once his descent and his abandonment of the profession, while the hereditary caste thus loses large numbers of those who are born into it. It cannot be recruited from outside. The reduction is no inconvenience at the present, the less so as it gives the priests who do practice a better chance of a living wage. But if it goes on very much further, it is likely to make some difference to the religious customs of the Parsis, unless indeed, which is all too likely, their own total diminishes. Pari passu. Before the organization of the priesthood can be described, it would be necessary to explain the division of the Parsis into sects. There is a schism among them, affecting practically nothing but details of ceremonial, which dates from June 6th, 1745. As in a famous episode of early Christian history, the original dispute concerned the calendar. My stomach keeps on rumbling. It's a distinctive moment in this video, distinctive moment in another video. But, that could be just a coincidence. It could have been waiting for that time, too. As in a famous episode of early Christian history, the original dispute concerned the calendar. It is too obvious a deduction from experience and the annals of religion that a sharp division can always be reckoned on if only a sufficiently trivial point of difference can be found. Well, it's not trivial if it's, something important. If they're just making up things as they go along, then it's trivial. And if that's what you think of the religion, why not pick a religion that you don't think is so made up as it's going along? The bulk of the Parsis observed Na'oros, or New Year's Day, on Monday, September 11th, 1916. A smaller section observed it on Saturday, August 12th. These dates represent what the vernal equinox has come to by neglecting the calendar for some centuries. The year has always been one of 12 months, of 30 days each, and 5 Gatha days added at the end. Na'oros accordingly arrives a day too soon when 4 years are complete, apart from the small correction by which we drop these 3 leap years in 4 centuries? A simple sum shows that the necessary intercalculation has been dropped for nearly 900 years by the September party and for 1,000 years by the August. The history of the difference of practice does not concern us, enough to state that the August party adopts the title of Kadmi, Ancient One, of those question-begging designations which are not unknown in Western ecclesiastical history. The Septembrists are Shenshahis, or royal, as they claim to perpetuate the practice of the Zoroastrian kings of Persia. There is a rather half-hearted movement now towards accommodating the solar calendar to the sun, from which it is clear both sects dissent rather seriously, since both parties are in the wrong, and since the difference between them is the outcome of a piece of negligence which each fell into many centuries ago. The reform should be easy, were it not for the unreasoning conservatism which all the world over exerts so much influence upon religion, and even more so in politics, I think. Constantly run into people, particularly Democrats, but Republicans too, can be pretty bad about they sound completely incapable of having any opinion that's, not party line. And it just could be the selection I've run into. There is even a precedent for reconciliation which might claim very special authority. To quote the naively unconscious language of the Gazetteer, in Persia, the error remained uncorrected till about 1075 of the Common Era. Jalaluddin Malik Shah of 1074 to 1092, King of Persia, ordered that a day should be added to the year whenever it was necessary in order to make the new year fall on the day the sun passed the same point of the ecliptic. He appointed Umar Khayyam, an astronomer, to make a calendar. The corrected year is called the Malak-Ahi calendar, and this is still the Persian revenue year. It is curious coincidence that the names so familiar as those of Omar Khayyam and Julius Caesar should be connected in the East and West, respectively, with the assimilation of the calendar to the sun. At the head of the Zoroastrian priesthood stands the Dashturs, or high priests. And remember, Zarathustra, very clearly, and every real prophet to follow him, did away with the professional priesthood. That there may be people who learned more and were more physically capable of whatever, but priesthood was in the hands of every man and woman in the community. Dastawar, Gathic, Dastva, dogma. The position of the Dastur answers fairly to that implied by the Avestan term Zarathustrotemo, a superlative adjective formed from the prophet's name. They may be recognized by the beautiful stoles which hang to the feet over their priestly white robes. And again, when you go on pilgrimage, a simple garment or whatever, but for the most part, it's principles. It's not specific styles of clothing that anybody asks for, a priest or otherwise. Stola is used to show how it is usually worn, but the shawl is sometimes carried on the arm. It is sometimes complimentary, not official. I was myself, James Hope Moulton, was ceremonially invested with one in Karachi. Their office is normally hereditary, passing to the eldest son. Dr. M.N. Dalla, the learned Dastur of Karachi, is an exception to this rule. In Bombay, there are 2 Dasturs of the Shen Shahi sect and 1 of the Kadmi. The duplication is the perpetuation of accidental conditions of the past connected with the comparatively recent influx of the Mofusul Parsis into Bombay. Indeed, the Kadmis have really 2 lines of high priesthood. About 20 years ago, so, the turn of 1800s to the 1900s, the representative of 1 line was disposed on the grounds of a breach of law for celebrating a marriage between parties precluded by consanguinity, of which he declared he was unaware. The vacancy was filled some 15 years later by the choice of a respected moped of good position. Some sort of blood issue, but perhaps it'd be interesting, maybe they should add another line to tell us what type of blood issue, although families forbid things upon themselves that religion doesn't, so. But meanwhile, the Dastur in the other line had died, and there was no heir. The Kadmis have not yet found a successor who will act, although they have applied to learned priests of the other sect. Every great fire temple has at present a Dastur in charge, and the latter settlement of Parsis, such as those at Udwada, Naosari, Surat, Pune, Karachi, have Dasturs. In the case of Surat, 1 for each sect. The Irani sect, consisting of Parsis who have come from Persia in modern times, have no Dastur of their own, but the officiating moped of a particular temple which they frequent acts of this capacity. Dasturs are naturally the referees in questions of doctrine and ceremonial, and there is, accordingly, a wish that they should be learned men. But, some of them are. There is Shams ul Ulama Darab Peshotan Sanjana of Bombay, who has taken up his father's task of editing the Din card, an immense Pahlavi treatise, preserving in epitome large masses of lost Avestan matter. And there is Dr. M.N. Dalla of Karachi, who stands alone in possessing a Western scientific training, which he received under Professor A.V. Williams Jackson of New York, the greatest authority on Iranian subjects in the English-speaking world. We name only those who have evidenced their learning in published works. It has been already indicated that the priesthood is hereditary. In fact, if the genealogies could be trusted, all priests except those of Kanbei belong not merely to the ancient Magian tribe, but to a single family of 12 centuries antiquity. The Aaron of this family was named Shapur, Sheh-Eryar, and he was among the earliest Parsi settlers in India. His grandson, Naryoseng, translated the Avesta, and as traditionally understood into Sanskrit, his rendering is among our indispensable authorities today. Unfortunately, the inclusion of this famous name only avails to wreck the whole scheme, for Naryoseng flourished some 4 centuries after the supposed epoch of Shapur. The women of priestly descent who have reserved them the privilege of spinning and weaving the kusti, or sacred thread, till lately were only married to priests. Like the Magi of 2,000 years ago, as described by Diogenes Laertius, the practicing priests of today wear white robes and white turbans, They also must keep the face unshaved. Well, the Bible says that men shouldn't do that too. They should not even trim. And you don't round the head. Well, you don't round the hairs on the head, you know what I mean. To shave the head or face and to wear colors are the outward and visible sign of abandoning the priestly calling. When for 3 generations a family has abstained from qualifying for priesthood and worn lay dress, they cease to be eligible. A would-be priest must be at least the great-grandson of a practicing priest. Some very outstanding Parsis, such as the late Feroz Shah Mehta, the late Mr. Dadabhai Naoroji, and the Tata family, have had priestly blood, but have not exercised their privilege. The initiation of a priest begins with his admission as a herbad or ervad, which, for the great majority, is the only step ever attained. Avestan Athrapati, master of pupils, are as usually taken master of learning. See, that's the only authority that the priests have, is that they have more, the higher priests have more authority. They've learned more than the other people. That's it. It's not like it really counts more for them to be in a prayer that other people are in. Because prayer is not just something you sit down and you watch. Maybe that's supplication, or maybe you are present for a ritual, and that counts for something, but you really should do more than just sit and watch. Only a few take the special qualification required for service in the fire temple and the performance of the greater ceremonies. An ervad may even pass direct from that rank to that of dastur without ever qualifying as a moped. Ervad is often used even by non-practicing priests, with connotation much like that of an academic title. It is needless for the purpose of this book to spend any space on the ritual of initiation. The exposition of ritual is best left to those for whom ritual means something. It is possible, however, to appreciate the original purpose of the austerities that form a necessary part of the initiation. And remember, according to the Bible, Jesus and the others were definitely ones for rituals. But rituals that just, the people couldn't pick out, that was quite the thing. Fasting, strict charity, and much meditation are prescribed. But in these days, the practice is to undergo the ceremony in the early youth, and it has therefore lost much of its original significance. I said it is possible, however, to appreciate the original purpose of the austerities that form a necessary part of the initiation. Okay, the central rite is that called Barashnum, which a Navar or Ervad does not repeat, and even a Dastur does not undergo. A Mobed, however, whose work is in the fire temple and the performance of the inner ceremonies, has to take it often. With its 9 days' tedium, he must atone for a journey by rail or by sea, or even the falling off his turban. Its details will be found in the Vendidad, set forth with the usual meticulous detail. The expenses of initiation are often borne by some pious donor who will give 500 to 1,000 ruples for the purpose. Is it ruples or rupees? RS is abbreviated. Often he is the layman for whose family priest's son is to be initiated. The boy is then called his Navar or Ervad. If the young Ervad wishes to go on to the status of a full moped, which he may do before he is 20, he must complete the learning of the whole yasna, the 72 yasnas. He is spared the Vendidad, which is indeed taken right through at the Nirong ceremony, at last from midnight till about 8 a.m., but it is read from the book. A Mobed will have by heart, perhaps, a full half of the extant Vedas, the extant Avesta, but he actually learns it all without understanding a word of it in the great majority of cases. On one occasion, the writer saw a ceremony known as the Yasna Rite, obligingly performed for his benefit by two Mopeds. As a feat of memory, it was really extraordinary. This was one of the shortest ceremonies, but it lasted a full hour, and involved the continuous performance of manual acts and repetition of formulae, which had to follow prescribed order exactly. To the spectators' astonishment, it proved that the officiating Moped did not know Avestan, and could not even recognize a word from the Asham Bohu when adapted for complimentary address. All this is therefore memory work, divorced from the slightest trace of intelligence. Well, memory work is intelligence, thank you very much, and it can help with other things too, but intention is sometimes even more important than meaning, isn't it? One can realize how galling such ignorance is to keen-witted, well-educated laymen who feel themselves dependent on the ministrations of a man who lets himself do what a gramophone might do better. See, that's the problem. At least you got it at the heart. A lot of Christians say, just worship Jesus and don't care about Jesus' teachings. Oh, I don't know much about Jesus' teachings or life, but he died for my sins, so no. If you love him, follow him. If you think that's the word of God that he's speaking, follow God, through, Matthew 7:21, you got to submit to the will of the one who sent him. Calling him Lord doesn't do much of anything. To make the matter worse, the general education of priests is on a low level. There are even 3 or 4 dasturs who cannot speak or understand English, and large numbers of Mopeds. When we compare the very high standard prevailing among Parsi laymen in this respect, the backwardness of the priests becomes very conspicuous. There are, of course, some learned priests, and even among those who perform without understanding the rites which make the sole demand on their mental equipment, they are, doubtless, some for whom the ancestral ceremonies have a real sacramental significance, even when conducted in an unknown language, but it is a fact keenly deplored by Parsis that there is no response to efforts made for raising the level of sacerdotal intelligence. 2 madrasas exist in Bombay, institutions founded expressly for the priesthood, that they might learn the Avestan and Pahlavi languages and study the texts they have to recite. One of them is under the guidance of the learned Dastur Darab Peshotan Sanjana, already named. The madrasas train a fair number of young Parsis for the degree examination in Avestan and Pahlavi as second language to English. Now, it really is a word, just like madrasa, midrasha, in Hebrew, Aramaic languages. It just means school. And sometimes the only schooling available is the religious school, or supposedly religious school. But they attract very few priests. As a class, they are content to repeat their text and perform the ritual and pocket their pence for the same. No teaching except the passing on of a rote knowledge like their own is expected of them. No wonder that the priests themselves feel the career is not worth pursuing, and put their clever sons into other callings. Well, if you learn the scripture and there's principles for life, it's up for you to take it outside the ritual. But if you really do the ritual right, it permeates into the rest of life. It brings character. It upholds character. It is very obvious, however, that when worship is almost entirely in the hands of a class that is shut up to mechanical functions, the community is bound to suffer. Well, because it chooses to put up with this. We may point out further that the neglect of so many priests to study their sacred text intelligently is emphatically rebuked by the Vendidad itself, which sets a higher level. The picture of the priest sitting up far into the night studying holy wisdom is surely not satisfied by a rote learning of texts in an unknown tongue. Well, the pattern and the form of the language and movements and stuff, they're supposed to do something. But again, it's intention. It's not just, okay, did we do the show? So many YouTube videos, or, the Catholic Church used to, they switch things around so you see everything the priest is doing. It used to be you'd sit there or stand there and you'd watch what was going on, and you'd somehow take some degree of an active role. And it wasn't that they were showing you exactly what was going on. That wasn't the point. But other churches have gone even further and had the priest be in the center and everybody faces the priest. But that's not quite it either. But, it's of course beyond the ritual. Rituals are beyond the ritual. You're enacting mythology. The facts just sketched have a bearing on conditions widely prevalent in the East. The bane of Indian education is the immense difficulty of emancipating it from the habit of learning by rote, to burden with matter unrelated to intelligence. A faculty of memory, all too ready to accept the burden, is a procedure likely to afflict with atrophy the reasoning powers of men. One recalls the immortal lines about the diligent examinees who wrote and wrote and wrote, but though they wrote it all by rote, they didn't write it right. It is always so, for even when they write it correctly, they cannot write it right. Rote knowledge is really no knowledge at all. It is absolutely undigested mental food, and the prominence given to it, in connection with religion, links itself at once with another feature we shall have to examine later, words which are repeated so often in worship, with the belief that the right recitation is of high religious importance, soon become in what in Hinduism is called mantram. The consequence of correctly repeating the Ahunavarya of the Ashambhoho are beyond all powers of reason to justify. No. If you're saying something wrong, then it means something wrong, and if you're offering obedience to God in particular forms, so theosophy steps in, and the religion is inflicted with a whole alien neo-Gnosticism, but that subject must be deferred. Now, sometimes the form isn't correctly preserved, but how do you expect to preserve the forms of religion, or the spirit of religion, otherwise?